Hey guys, Tina here. Today I'm coming to you with another video in my series, A Year in Review videos, in which I talk about my reading experience this year. This time around I'm going to talk to you about my favorite new starts to a new series, which means that I'll be talking about the first book in the series that I started this year. Now these books are not necessarily books that came out this year, it's just the books that I've read this year for the first time. So let's get started. At the beginning of the year I was really excited to get into more sci-fi books, and basically I think this is the only sci-fi book that I ended up reading, but I really enjoyed it, and that is James S.A. Corey's Leviathan Wakes, which is book 1 in the Expanse series. And it's a space opera. It tells the story of this crew that accidentally stumbles on an abandoned ship, and they come across these secrets that basically ruins their lives because they are on the run after that, and they have to fight for their lives. And we also get to meet a detective who is searching for this missing girl, and throughout the course of the book their stories combine, and we get to see what happens. It was a really interesting book to read. It was actually not really hard to get into. Yes, there's some technical terminology, but it's definitely not off-putting or anything like that. It's basically a murder mystery adventure book, and I really liked it how humanity has colonized our solar system, and you get to meet all these different races that because they live on Mars or wherever they live, they have different characteristics, and it's really interesting to see how humanity evolved, and naturally there are clashes between different groups, and it's basically just on Earth, just like it's basically just like on Earth, except it's expanded, and I really enjoy that. And now the next season comes out this year of this series, and I will definitely be picking the second book up before that, and hopefully I will read more sci-fi in the next year, because I failed miserably this year. Another book that I was really happy to come across is The Invisible Library by Genevieve Cogman. This is book 1 in a trilogy, and the third book, is just about to come out in December, and if you decide to pick this series up, you can just marathon it. But yes, it tells the story of Irene, who works for this intradimensional library, and once in a while when, the library finds a certain edition of a certain book in one of the universes, because there are parallel universes, and yes, when that happens they send Irene on a mission to collect that book and bring it back to the library, and that's what happens. She's sent with her apprentice Kai on a mission to get a certain book, and when she gets there the book is missing, the previous owner is dead, actually he was murdered, and she has to figure things out. She has to find the book and just figure out what happened, and yeah, that's the adventure. Takes off from there. It has this Victorian steampunkish vibe. I mentioned before that it reminds me of Gail Carriger, sort of, but it's not as humorous, so but still really enjoyable, and I cannot wait to finish the series. I was hoping that I was going to do it by the end of the year, but I was really in a really weird mood in November, and I just couldn't get into the second book. But yes, at the beginning of the year I will read everything, so yeah. Next I have The Dark Days Club by Alison Goodman, which is another book 1 in a trilogy, and it tells the story of Lady Helen, who is about to be introduced to the Queen and start searching for a husband, but what she finds instead are demons and other ghastly creatures, and she gets sucked into this world that she didn't even realize existed. And yeah, it was a really great adventurous book, and I really enjoyed it, and I cannot wait for the sequel to come out soon, luckily. The next author I actually already mentioned in this video, and that is Gail Carriger. This year I picked up her Finishing School series. Actually, I just managed to read the first book, sadly, but there's still time to read the rest of it. But this is Etiquette and Espionage, and it tells the story of Sophronia, who is this 14-year-old girl. She's sort of tomboyish, and this is again Victorian, era, and she, her mother's having a really hard time dealing with her. She wants to have a lady for a daughter and not this tomboy, and she decides to send her off to a finishing school in the hopes of, that they will manage to turn her into a lady. But sadly, or luckily for us, she doesn't do her research really well, and the finishing school that Sophronia is sent to is actually more than that. Aside from nice manners, she's also taught how to assassinate, how to, you know, poison and just do really spy things, and it's a really adventurous book. It's really humorous and I really enjoyed it, and again, I will be picking the sequels up, but yeah, I just didn't manage to get around to doing it this year. One of the first books that I actually read this year was Truthwitch by Susan Dennard, which tells the story of Safi and Isolde, who are witches, and in their world there are different types of witches, but Truthwitch is the one that it's most sought after, and Safi is just such a witch. Basically, they can tell the truth whether a person is lying or not, and these two girls usually get into sort of, you know, a lot of trouble, and that's why they have to go on a run, and we get to follow their adventure throughout the book. The beginning was sort of slow, but then the story really picked up, and I will be rereading this book in January probably, because the sequel is coming out and I have to refresh my memory because yeah, I sort of forgot a lot of it. But yeah, it's not going to be hardship, I can tell you that. I really enjoyed this book and I really can recommend it more. During Booktubeathon, I read Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, which is book 1 in her Farseer trilogy, and actually book 1 in a whole bunch of trilogies in this world, which is called the Six Duchies. This trilogy tells the story of Fitz, who is the bastard son of the king in waiting, and when his father realizes that he has fathered a bastard, he abdicates, and Fitz is then raised by the stable master, and later on the king, his grandfather, picks an interest in him and you know, makes sure that he's the future assassin. He's basically becomes the assassin's apprentice, and we get to follow Fitz's life throughout the trilogy and see how he deals with the court intrigue and all the things that are happening, and we get to see him grow up. I really enjoyed this trilogy. I read the whole thing, and luckily that's, you know, Robin Hobb has a lot more books to read, so I will not be without her books in the next year, but I really enjoyed it. And if you want to try some fantasy books, I think these are pretty easy to get into. The world is not that dissimilar to ours. There are 2 magic systems, but I don't think they are that hard to understand. What am I saying? So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and if you're into fantasy, at some point you really should pick Robin Hobb up and try her out. I just fell in love with her books, and I just am waiting for the time to pick the next series up, really. And finally we have Lady Midnight by Cassandra Clare. This is book 1 in her Dark Artifices trilogy, and it's another of her Shadowhunter trilogies. And I have been waiting for this book for a while. I have loved Emma and Julian since we read The City of Heavenly Fire, which came out a few years back, and it's really nice to start a new trilogy in this world and finally sort of finish the Mortal Instruments because that one maybe dragged a bit too long, and just to get new characters, basically what I'm trying to say is, you know, and yeah, we get to see Emma and Julian and Blackthorn siblings, which there are quite a lot of them, and what I liked most about this is just the family connection between the siblings. The whole mystery was not that interesting to me, but don't let that stop you from, you know, reading this book, because plenty of people love this book, you know, for different reasons than I did, but I just love these big families, and this is another of those, and I really enjoyed it. And hopefully, you know, the next book is just as good, and luckily we don't have to wait long, you know, before it comes out, so yeah. So those were a few new series that I got to explore this year, and I'm pretty sure the next year will be just as productive in that regard. Although the amount of books that I have on my shelves, really, there's a few series that I should just finish before I start buying new ones, but you know how that is. What can you do? You just have to buy new books, right? So let me know down in the comments what some of the series that you started this year were, and yes, thank you for watching this video, and see you in my next one. Bye!